So over the weekend, the Libertarian Party had its convention. Some wild moments in the convention, but overall they got their leaders. They've got Gary Johnson as the head of the ticket. He's running for president, former governor of New Mexico. And then you've got William Weld is going to be his VP, former two-time governor of Massachusetts. They're both former Republicans, now Libertarians. Weld promised the Libertarian Party that he would be a Libertarian for life because they were questioning his loyalty to the Libertarian Party. And then you start to look at some of the polling and you begin to think, maybe these guys got a shot. So first, let me give you some general polls. CNN Washington Post poll says, another national poll showed that 44% of registered voters would want a third party to run against Trump and Hillary Clinton, the likely Democratic nominee. So 44% is saying that they want a third party. That's a big, big number. Fairly unprecedented in modern times. Now, they didn't say Libertarian Party. We're going to get to that in a second. Now, you go to a Monmouth University poll. Now, this is just for voters in New Jersey, but it gives you some snapshot. And they explain in a head-to-head contest, Clinton currently has a support of 38% of New Jersey registered voters, and Trump has a support of 34%. Another 11% volunteer that they will vote for a third party or independent candidate, even though the poll question did not include that option. So that 11% number, again, is amazing. They're writing it in. No, I don't like these two people. I want a third party. They're like, we didn't even ask you that. No, I'm telling you, I don't care if you asked me. I want a third party. And by the way, New Jersey's deeply blue. I mean, we're talking about presidential elections. I can't remember the last time New Jersey voted for a Republican in a presidential election. Hillary Clinton only winning by 4 points. Okay, now, then they finally asked, hey, what if we put Gary Johnson in there in the Libertarian Party? And in this case, they also put in Jill Stein of the Green Party. So this is, again, just New Jersey registered voters. 37% then go to Clinton, 31% to Donald Trump, 5% to Gary Johnson, and 4% to Jill Stein. 4%. That's a sizable number for Jill Stein, but Gary Johnson doing even better. But finally, we get to a national poll that does have Gary Johnson in it. In previous years, I've been covering politics for now over 20 years, right? That he's going to be at 1-2% in a national poll at best, partly because I just saw him run in 2012, and he got to almost 1% of the vote, which is, it's a decent start for a third party, but really not much to talk about. Get a load of this Morning Consult poll. 38% for Hillary Clinton, 35% for Donald Trump, 10% for Gary Johnson, 17% undecided. The undecided number is big. That Gary Johnson number is almost unbelievable. Look, if you're not knee-deep in politics, there's almost no chance you know who Gary Johnson is. I bet you of the 10% that said Gary Johnson, most of them didn't know who Gary Johnson was. They're like, Hillary Clinton? No. Donald Trump? No. Gary Johnson? Oh, okay, fine. That is a great start for the Libertarian Party. It's a great start for any third party. This election, this general election, you think it's going to be one person against another, Republican versus Democrat, like we've always had? Buckle up. I don't think so. I think a lot of people might come in. Here come the Libertarians, and they start at 10 points before anybody even knows who they are. That's an amazing start. You have to give them all the credit in the world. Now, what's the media going to do instead? Here they come. They're going to be dismissive. Like, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I like Huffington Post, and I like a lot of their writers, including these guys, but not this piece, because it's a classic establishment media kind of, like, Libertarian Party, come on, please. Of course, they're never going to be anything, right? So Sam Stein and Jason Cherkis write, but Johnson is also kind of an oddball, at least compared to other politicians, who's most at ease talking obsessively about his personal fitness. Now, look, to me, when I see, let me give you context, by the way. There are some positions of the Libertarian Party I agree with, anti-war, they're kind of anti-war, largely anti-war, let's be fair to them, right? Drug legalization, you go down the list, things that when they're actually in favor of liberty, right? Then there are economic positions which I find comical. Let's just give the rich even more. Let's cut all their taxes. Now, all might be a hyperbole, but not by much. So trust me that I do not agree with the Libertarians on at least half their platform, and aggressively so, right? But you got to give people their due, and you got to look at the polling and see for what it really is. 10% is a shockingly high number to start with. And what does the press start with? Like, oddball. Okay, well, and then they continue. Here's another section of the article. How seriously do you report on a candidate who's climbing mountains as frequently as he's issuing policy papers? But wait a minute, guys. When Paul Ryan was working out with weights and all that, everybody was like, oh, look at Paul Ryan. He works out. Oh, good for him. Such a, in good shape and looks good and all this stuff. Now, somehow you took Gary Johnson being in shape and being fit and used it against him. What an oddball. Keeps talking about how he's in shape and he climbs Mount Everest with a broken leg, which, by the way, is a little impressive. He might have some willpower to do that, right? And does these, triathlons, etc. I don't really care too much about that, but it's a weird premise to say, like, I'm a weirdo. Why aren't you issuing policy papers? But you don't know that he's not issuing policy papers. He's allowed to be fit and have political positions. All right, if it was just one or two references, I wouldn't have even brought it up. Here's reference number 3. But Republican voters didn't see Han Solo because they were referring to an article where somebody said he looked from a certain angle like Harrison Ford. If they bothered to notice Johnson at all, they caught him flailing or making a joke about dog shit. Yes, dog shit. Okay, that was from the 2012 race. Donald Trump made a joke about his penis size. Now, I know Huffington Post also pointed that out, and so the rest of the media, right? But that apparently was not a disqualifier. Now, here, he was flailing, and he talks about things he's not supposed to talk about. But yes, but the writers of this piece and the rest of the media, you're still not getting it. We're at a different moment in time. Yes, in 2012, Bernie Sanders wouldn't have done nearly as well. Donald Trump would have been laughed out of the race. Gary Johnson was in the race and got about 1%. We all understand that. But now he's polling at 10% instantaneously. That's amazing. It's not about Gary Johnson. It's about a phenomenon that you should be fascinated by and as investigative reporters look into instead of being like, oh yeah, last time it didn't work, flailing, got you, dismiss, 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 right? All right, look, last one, 4th reference now. That is dismissive and derisive. But while the 2012 campaign may have had its share of humiliations, his ego remains firmly intact for 2016. Don't do that. Okay. Give everybody their fair chance. Look at their policy positions. But this is unfortunately a lot of times what the establishment does. We have decided in our infinite wisdom that some people are legitimate and others are not legitimate. And if we put you in the illegitimate category, then we will mock you mercilessly from day one, and it doesn't really matter how well you're doing the polling. We're coming for you, and we will never treat you with any kind of respect that maybe your new numbers actually merit. And part of the reason they do that is because they don't want non-establishment people shaking things up. I don't think the guys who wrote this are thinking that consciously, but buried in their subconscious is groupthink, which is Bernie Sanders, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein must not be allowed in the... No, it's not. No. They don't think consciously must not be allowed. But unconsciously, they're like, no, it can't be. It can't. Of course it's not going to be Bernie Sanders. Of course it's not going to be Gary Johnson. Don't be ridiculous. I dismiss him out of hand. By the way, you guys also dismissed Donald Trump in the beginning. How did that turn out? So there's 2 reasons why you got to correct your attitude. 1, to do actual reporting, okay? 2, you got to realize your establishment bias and realize that, hey, maybe the country's in a different mood. You might love the establishment. You might be part of the establishment, whether you know it or not. But the country does not love that establishment. They would like to change it. So they see Gary Johnson, they go, right off the bat. Some say, sign me up, and others say, I'm listening. And now understand, finally, that this is all very relevant because now the 2 parties control the debate stage. And they say you can't get on the debate stage unless you reach an astronomical number of a 15% in the polls. For third parties, that is historically incredibly difficult. And they put that bar there so that it could not be reached. But at 10%, they're almost there. I mean, they were certainly starting a conversation about whether they can reach it. And you got 2 former Republican governors that even the mainstream media have to acknowledge, well, that's legit, right? So you got to knock those numbers down and create that cycle to make sure they are not allowed to get into the national conversation and tell people not to vote Republican or Democrat. Remember, bow your head. You must choose from one of these two parties. Well, that is not the mood the American people are in, and you could tell by their reaction to the Libertarian Party. So it's way past time that you guys take them seriously.